Would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to be over there with this wonderful place, and I'm very much thankful. My main objective of this talk will be something which is related to how these what is actually the science behind it, and how these things are being taken up in the perspective of the physiological principles, the principles which are something common for all, and which can be of some sort of integrative medicine, which can somehow bridge between the contemporary medicine and the various things together which come as a component called as mind body medicine. So I'll be talking about some general principles, and I'll try to see how the mind body connection is working, and how from Reiki, or from say mental imagery, or from biofeedback, or from yoga, or meditation, or tai chi, or massage therapy, or aromatherapy, all these things are all different fields. They have all different mechanisms, but ultimately they come to us, they are received by us, and then they mediate some common substrates on which these things action, they put their action, including the placebo effect. So I'll be trying to it. Since the time is short, I was given 1 hour earlier, so I'll just try to cut short or flip through the slides as it comes to. So what is mind body medicine in general? Another at the level of the behavioral, another at the level of the social efficiency or the social behavior, or peak performance, as Dr. Patrick was talking about. So according to National Institute of Health Science, this is the definition of mind body medicine which is being taken up. And these are the proven techniques. These are the techniques which have been somehow have been given the light. And as we can see, these are all conglomerates of various myriads of things. For example, if we go to yoga, and if we talk about India, it has been something prevalent for thousands of years. And biofeedback and other techniques, if we talk in the instrumentation context, it is something which has taken place over say past 20 to 40 years, not more than that. Again, there are other components like cognitive behavioral therapies, which are the proven techniques being done in the psychiatry for past 100 years or so. So what I'm trying to say is these are the techniques which are given autogenic training, and spirituality also somehow comes over here only. The spirituality is also considered as one of the mind body technique. If it talks in a scientific context, that if a person is trying to be spiritual, he is trying also to increase his or her coping abilities to meet out with the stress and to have an adjustment in the long term measures. So these are the proven things, and there is a considerable evidence now which talks about that the psychological as well as the physiological functioning are improved. The advantage of usual mind body techniques is, of course, it is not once and for all, that it does not have much of the side effects. It can be given. If some placebo effect does not give you a good effect, it may not give you the bad effect also. And nowadays, the current trend, where we in the 21st century, as we are sitting right now, the current place of mind body medicine is that it is used as an adjunct along with the conventional therapy. Earlier it was not used. Some of the things were considered as fake. They were considered only as placebo. They were not given any place in the modern medicine. They were not given a place in the therapy. As late as the the American Cardiovascular Association's guidelines says, in 2017, I think last year only it was released, it was told that the person should be given meditation as a technique to reduce and to mitigate the stress. And along with that, the medical management should be done. It speaks volumes about our own country, from where this technique had arisen thousands of years back. And once the Western world has given its approval, now it is being accepted by us. So history of mind body medicine or holistic or integrative medicine, it talks about so many things. So I'll just not take as usual. I'll just try to be a little bit faster about these things, because we know about it. It has been talked about by other speakers. That yoga was not considered, it was not made for being for the healthy living. Yoga was never devised for that. Yog itself means jog, judav, or connections. So Atma with Paramatman in the higher context of it. But then it was observed by the scientists, by the current public, by the previous centuries also. All those people who were actually practicing it, who were actually doing this sort of mind body medicine, healthy living was a byproduct of it. And they started taking it up that the sickness is there somewhere in us, some mool problem is there, and that root problem is somehow causing the issues to us. So the yoga has now has been used over here, and for thousands of years it was going on. And scientifically it is defined as a mind body technique that involves the breath control, physical exercises, and meditation, which promotes the physical, mental, social, and spiritual well being. This is the definition which has been given by most of the institutes over there. Now, how does it relate to us? How does it relate to us? It's again, many speakers have talked about it, but I'll just try to put it up again. You see, this is what our Shastras or Yogas have, the Yoga Sutra has told us. Our body is composed of Panchakosha. I know that you people know more than me about it. And you can see over here the mouse. Is there any mouse or some? It's not, cursor is not working. But we can see that there are 5 layers. Anandmay Kosh, Vigyanmay, Manomay Kosh, Pranamay Kosh, and Annamaya Kosh. The gross body, the outer body that we are having it, it's not coming. The outer body, just I want water, please. So the outer body, 1/5 of us lie inside. Only when all those problems, all the elemental issues have come up in these koshas are also the bodies only. When the subtle bodies are affected, they say that our culture says that only we are 1/5 of what we are being seen outside. So in the modern medicine, what is happening is we are just we are looking at the signs and symptoms of 1/5 of it. 4/5 of it is lying inside like an iceberg, which actually does not give us the answers of the disorders. And as per the Yoga Sutras, what they say is, if there is any disturbance in the Manomay Kosh, it creates the problems in the Pranamay, that creates the problems in Annamaya Kosh, that is in our gross body. And that brings out the Vyadhis or the various disorders or the physical disorders. So physical disorders are the manifestations of something which is happening somewhere. In today's context only, we say it as psychosomatic disorders. But this has been told as such from the context of it. This I have taken it from one of the Yoga Sutras only. As such, it has been given thousands of years back. And the other context of what they say is, if there is Manomay Kosh problem, and if there is a problem in the Vigyanmaya, and they have given clear distinctions of it, what is Vigyanmaya Kosh or Vijnanamaya Kosh, they say that Manomay, when it affects the Vigyanmaya Kosh, the incapacity to take the decision occurs. And that incapacity leads to a lot of stress. The person is not able to meet out the inner with the outer environment, that the stress manifests itself in various forms, and it gives rise to the psychological issues and as well as the chronic disorders which also comes in our gross bodies. So we know that all these things were active. Everything was going fine, and as the previous speaker has told, that all the therapies which have come till now, all those therapies somehow were somewhere related to the energy flow. Something was flowing inside. We always considered that there was something deep inside us, and that was taking care of us. But something happened that as we went into the advent of the modern medicine came, we started having this reductionist view. We started reducing something, we started isolating something, and we somehow at some point, like over here, if we talk about modern medicine, this blind eye looking at the elephant is a very appropriate thing which can be connected now to today's world. If you go to a gastroenterologist, he does not know what a psychologist is doing. If you go to a neurologist, he says, no, the orthopedics is not my issue. This you go to someone else. If you go to some one person, MBBS, he says, no, I am not a specialist. So you have to go to a specialist. So today this sort of problem has come up, although it has its own advantages, because the reductionist view has allowed us to look telescopically or microscopically into a particular component of it. And that is how we all have evolved as a society. But that has also created a disconnect also. We all may have evolved individually, but a continuous connect in the society is not there. and that is manifest in our society psychology also. Am I right? So this disconnect in the mind body components, this is somehow we see in the current conventional medicine also. We are viewing a person as various components, and we say that we specialize in a particular component. Somebody in trunk, somebody in legs, somebody in ears, and everybody says that we are experts. But all the therapies, except for this, especially the mind-body medicine, they all were. Now, what is the reality? The reality is, although people say no, these are fake, or somebody says these are not much scientific evidence is there. Nearly 50% chronic illness patients presently use some form of mind-body therapy application, and it is continuously increasing, especially in the Western world. In the Indian context, I will say that there is still a fanciful idea of the medicines. We are a medicine-ridden, pharmacological-driven society. If you go to the Western society, there is a more and more use of the prevention as well as the drug, disease, inhibition, like those things are there. So what is there? The modern challenges that our society is facing is that huge burden is there. More than $2.3 trillion is being invested only in US. Forget about that in India. Half of the society in India, out of 100 crores, we don't have the basic health economy is not able to provide it to the more than 50%. 60% of it is deprived. You go 40 kilometers out of Bangalore, people may still be struggling for a paracetamol. That is where we are. Although over here there may be thousands of places which we are having. And there is, and now all the modern lifestyle changes, they are the accelerated aging process, and there is decreased life expectancy is there because of all these lifestyle. Nobody is dying today of any infectious disorders, but this is another stat which is specially related to our Indian audience here, that from 2015 onwards, the statistics tell that every 1 out of 2 India is dying out of CVD related, cardiovascular related death. It is a huge number, 130 crores I am talking about. And there are many factors for that. And one of the factors is, people used to say that Southeast Asian population has some genes which are putting us at a disadvantage as compared to the Western world or to the rest of the world also, only Southeast Asian. But now the recent things they have told that being an Indian itself is a risk. There are some genes in us, I'll just try to come to that. There are some things which we can't help, but then there are lots of things which we can help. Like for example, cholesterol, smoking, blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, alcohol, physical inactivity. Physical inactivity is one of the biggest risk factors in Indian society. So how is it related? Now this coronary artery disease in Indians, it is a combination of nature and nurture, sedentary lifestyle. But then people say that, okay, fine, our guns are loaded, no problem about that. Even if you have a loaded gun, you don't pull the trigger, no harm is done. But since there are many things which are wrong in us, which we need to do it, and mind-body intervention, when the earlier people, when rishis, munis were designing it, or in the Western world they were designing many other therapies, they always consider these things as important. So if we come to our Indian food, this is how it looks like. I hope that I am making a correct picture of it. And yes, overall it is exactly like that. If you, wherever you go, it is exactly like that. So, and again you see, how many of us actually have taken 5 fruits today? How many would have taken it in last week? How many would have taken it in last month? How many are giving it to our children? How many of our children are getting nourished on those lines? These are the things. Again, if you come to our Yoga Shastra, there was always saying over there that food is a very important component of it. Jaisa khaye ann vaisa bane man. There was a saying that itself talks about it, that food and your manosthiti are connected. So this is what, and though epidemics is increasing, we have more than 1 billion adults, and the more of them, the childhood obesity. If you talk about India, in India at least 20% of the school going children are overweight, and this is another very fascinating asset of it, that we are now becoming an affluent society, at least in some areas, but these facilities are something which we all are having. Either they are used for drying the clothes or they are given some other aspect of it, right? So why I am talking about this in mind body medicine? Because when we take something in a holistic sense, everything is interrelated, and all of them, they mediate their actions through their same physiological things, which I'll try to come up to in next few slides, right? So we are a device ridden society, that we all know about it, and more than 70% we do not engage in any regular physical activity. The stress is a very big factor. So where are these applications coming into? These is I'll not get into the list of all these things. It is for all the audience to see into it, that this is all the proven scientific things which have occurred mainly in last 10 to 20 years, where they have accepted that if mind body therapy is used as a component or as a tool, it drastically reduces the number of medications which a patient is taking, or it improves the performance of the person. That means the person is having the capability of dealing not only with the stress, even going for the peak performance. And the basic thing, what in one word if I try to put, is all these therapies do nothing but try to put the homeostasis. That means they help in the maintenance of the internal environment of the body and the mind, so that the mind remains tranquil and the bodies, they are performing. But what is happening for us, including me, the thing is the body remains at rest, the mind keeps wandering. Although we were designed to have mind at rest and bodies to move. So these are the things. Now what are the substrates? What are those places where these mind-body connections are seen, where they do actually work on? For example, if I'm talking about Tai Chi, it has nothing to do with hypnotherapy. These two are totally related things. So what are the various places where they find out? The three components which they are usually found out is nervous system, endocrine system, and immune system. And one of the easiest, commonest, and one parameter which can be utilized to find out even in a non-invasive way that the person is okay is heart rate variability. It is something which gives us the, I'll just try to come to it, how it is can be used. That heart rate variability is a one, in fact it will be, it is put up over here in the stall itself, that you can just take the heart rate variability and you can get a composite of all these places of the system where it is working out, right? So what is the mechanistic psychophysiological framework of all the mind-body therapies put up together? So if it is, I'll take up two terms which we all know, but still for the sake of it, I'll just try to take the term. First is neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is that, earlier it was considered that our mind is fixed, and after 5 years or say after 2 years of age, and there was also saying in English also, old horses can't learn and they can't run and all those things. It was all built on one single basic idea which was developed over centuries, that the mind does not change. The body can grow, the adult stem cells are there, the adult stem cells are not present in the nervous system. Since they are not present, the mind cannot change. But the recent, again, the fMRI and other studies have found it. No, that is not the correct context. It is a lifelong ability of the brain to reorganize neural pathways based on the new experiences. That is, if we challenge the brain, it will try to come up it, just like the person is doing the dumbbell exercises. The brain is also capable of doing these exercises, right? So now this is the another thing, that is the telomere and lifestyle diseases research. A lot of research is going on. We know that there are so many various parameters like cholesterol, like we are having inflammatory parameters, interleukins and others. People are interested in research. There is a lot of research in past 10 years has not. What actually is happening? What happens when a person ages? What happens when a person gets into the disease? And they have found out that these caps which are present at the ends of all the chromosomes, these caps are called as the telomeres, and they function. Now this is the lady who got the Nobel Prize 9 years back, and you will be surprised, her group, After getting the things, they came to South India, and they also did many studies in Carolina and other places in US on Shamta meditation. That means Shamta is Kshma. That means we are able to forgive. Forgiveness meditation. They did the study, and they saw it that when a person goes into a state of meditation, even for a period of 1 to 2 months, the telomere length increases. What is the importance of that? Telomeres, as we see, is at the present at the ends of the chromosomes, similar to what egglets are present at the ends of our shoelaces. Suppose if we lose these egglets, what will happen? What will happen to the shoelace? This is what will happen. So once they get frayed, the same way our chromosomes get frayed when there is huge stress building up in the cell. So she found out with her group, with a lot of people who are doing it, and this is one of the most active research area right now going on. And they found that the telomere, it is one of the most studied cardiometabolic marker. And in that marker, they have found out that this fraying of the chromosomes can be prevented. And when they found the cardiovascular, as I have told you that Indians are so much are having a higher propensity for it, we can see that there is reduced telomere length amongst all those things which I told you earlier: atherosclerosis, hypertension, obesity, diabetes, smoking, physical inactivity, stress, chronic infections. They reduce the telomeres, and whenever the telomeres they reduce, they react in two ways: either aging or cancer or mental disorders. So because the cell becomes unstable cell will try to either come down, say I am not good enough, so it gets deleted, or it says no, I am good enough, and it will start using the wrong machinery and produces the cancer. So psychophysiological action of mind body practices, this is the recent one which lot of all the various thousands of research papers have ultimately. I tried to do a little bit of meta-analytic study. I read a bit of it. This is what in simple words they have trying to say, that the action of mind body practices does not work only on the mind or on the body. It works from the outer body, it goes to the inner, all the neuraxis levels. That means at the level of the endocrine, at the level of our brainstem, then at the level of the cortex. Before that there is subcortical areas which are present, and then from there to the brain. And it does not matter how brainy you are, it does not matter how fit you are apparently. The important thing is how much is your transformation, there is transfer of information, how much is the dynamic transfer, the transfer of information is going on. And one of the biggest thing, ma'am will know about more about it, she can talk at length about it, is that it is the vagus nerve, which is one of the biggest nerves, which is the biggest cranial nerve in us. And it has been found the activity of the vagus nerve is one of the chief parameters which is capable of linking the emotions with our body, with our mind. So the more the psychophysiological information, because it is something which is carrying from something from here to everything from here. We are now today talking about brain gut axis. We are talking about so many brain areas. So I'm trying to make it a little bit simple thing. What this slide clearly shows, whether you are doing any mind body practice, whether you are eating a good food, or whether you are doing an exercise, or you are doing a mental exercise, what it simply does is it increases the information from your periphery. It goes up via the nerves, it crosses, there are channels which we can say in a spiritual context the chakras, but it is not only the endocrine portion, but it also involves the other structures also. It grows up over there, it goes over here to the subcortical structures where we are having limbic system. Now the limbic system is the system which is controlling our anxiety, our fears, our any emotional response. And I'm sure that you must have heard of the term hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. Whenever our hypothalamus is called as the master gland of the body. So if the master gland is working, all our hormones are working nicely. So, and it acts on pituitary, and pituitary acts on the adrenal axis, and that causes the release of the stress hormones, which we say as the catecholamines or adrenaline. We say adrenaline rush is coming in the person. So this whole axis is corrected, this whole axis is there, And when we are talking about genes, as I told you that we Indians are having some, at the genetic level we are predisposed, but there is something which is called as epigenetic mechanism. Earlier, the more of the people were talking about that, this gene, so means this definitely will pass to the next generation. It means if a person, father is blind, we say, and his son or her son will definitely be blind only. Why is it so? Now there is a lot of saying over there, if the father is having this diabetes, it does not mean that the family has to be. Only the gun is loaded. There is a lot of epigenetic mechanism, means if a person is capable of increasing the information transfer at every moment at the dynamic level, it causes an increase in the, it actually the puts in the cascade of the reactions which brings about the balance in all those organs. And the epigenetic means the DNA is something like a stair. We know that it is spiral and we are having it, but there is always a twining around of the histones around it. Earlier people never used to talk about it. They used to say, no, it is just like a binding glue only, nothing more than that. Now people know that it is actually this glue which is responsible for the gene only, which gene is going to express itself. It is in the environment, whether it is outside or whether it is inside, which gene is going to transcribe or which gene is going to express in us. So how it happens, I'll just try to see to it. So the recent study says that the prefrontal cortex, this area of the brain, and the anterior cingulate cortex and the insular cortex, that means these are three areas. Insular cortex is something which is anterior cingulate cortex is one area which allows us to empathize. If suppose he is in pain, I can feel his pain, although I may not be at pain at all. So it is very important that as a society we are able to feel each other's pain, although we may be affluent also. So like that, they have found out that prefrontal cortex is the area which is responsible for all our cognitive activities. Whatever we are doing, all the cognitive activities are responsible. Insular cortex is capable of switching us into and out of it, whether we are thinking inside or we are thinking outside. So they said that this executive homeostatic network or EHN is one area of the brain that sends the signals from above down and it comes to the peripheries, right? And then there is similar thing. If a periphery is stimulated, for example, by the exercise, the same pathway will be stimulated and it goes in and it comes to the prefrontal cortex. If this area is not working properly, then the person will have more and more of this stress. Let us take an example of it. Suppose if there is any stress. Now stress can be something outside or it can be inside. Suppose it may not be stressful for him to walk for 100 meters, but a person who is having Parkinson's disease, it may be difficult even 5 meters for him to walk for it. He will consider it very stressful. So the event is decided that how the stress is perceived. It goes to the executive homeostatic network, and then from the executive homeostatic network over there, if the person is having good activity over here, he will say that there will be simultaneous. So this will stimulate the stress will go to this all the subcortical structures. One thing which we can see very clearly over here is central autonomic areas. Now these autonomic areas mean sympathetic, parasympathetic. So Shumna, Ida, Pingla, Nadi, as we say in our system. Again, thousands of years back they had already described about it. So these autonomic areas of the brain, along with this hippocampus, septum, amygdala, I'll not get into all those things. Ultimately, these are the areas which go from the cortex, it comes to the subcortical areas and they stimulate it. If the person is not having good connection from here to the subcorticals, from here to here, that's it, not more than that. Just 6 millimeters above and below 6 millimeters, you come to 1 centimeter, that's it. If there is not proper information is going on, if the brain is not having this inhibitions or the excitations, the person will find that the stress straight away goes, it comes to all these areas and there is bang, there is lighting of all these areas. A person starts feeling anxious, fearful, and person does not have any control of over his or her senses. There is sympathetic overdrive, there is parasympathetic underactivity, and the person starts feeling, no, this is something beyond me, and it brings on a lot of reactions. what it does later on, it activates our immune system. In our immune system, there is an activation of all the wrong things, pro-inflammatory things, they get activated. They go to all the cells of the body, and ultimately we find that the person is having the peripheral structures, may give rise to diabetes or hypertension or stress or depression or anxiety, and all those disorders occur. So if this is not happening, the person will have the negative seeing of life. This is how the stress can lead him to into, and he will find it that the stress is able to do it. That means there is more of the signals are going from below to above, from the subcortical to the brain, but the brain is not having the control over it, and so it goes the other way, right? But when a person goes for any sort of activities, this I'll just try to take, this is a slightly detailed slide. I'll just try to go it a bit slow, and then I'll just try to finish it off. Now the stress, whatever I have told, it is just like a sum up of all those things. What we can see, either the stress can be perceived from outside or from inside. Ultimately, it goes to this, our executive homeostatic network, which is there in the brain. I told these three areas. From there, it stimulates all the subcortical structures. But one thing which we can see is that heart rate variability, or HRV, is mentioned over here. What most of the studies are coming onto is, it is actually the autonomic dysregulation which is occurring because of those central autonomic areas dysregulation that leads to two things. Now, if the stress is too much, what will happen? This will come if the sympathetic nervous system is activated. For example, it is the sympathetic. What happens? From the splenic nerve, which is present somewhere over here, this is the spleen which is present. So from the splenic nerve, it comes to the spleen, which is the house of all the macrophages. So it contains the receptors for sympathetic drive, that is adrenoreceptors. So those adrenoreceptors are stimulated. That leads to the release of these factors, which are the pro-inflammatory, that is TNF alpha and interleukins. Wherever these go, the inflammation occurs. If it is in eyes, you will find that the eye is congested. If it is in brain swelling, it creates to edema and it gives rise to psychological issues. If it is in pancreas, it gives rise to diabetes. So the common factor is that if there is an overdrive of this sympathetic nervous system, it stimulates this TNF alpha and interleukin 6 release from here. And if there is a person is cool, calm, capable of maintaining the stress within the level of eustress, he does not allow it to happen that it goes out of it. The thing is that there is a parasympathetic nervous system stimulation is more in that person, and in this splenic nerve there is a stimulation of the cholinergic receptors. What it leads to? It leads to the release of anti-inflammatory factors like interleukin 10. There are many other factors. I'll not go into those things. Now ultimately the thing is that there is spleen will release it into the blood, and now it goes to whole body. Now if it goes to the body, it also goes to the brain. We know that our brain is protected by blood-brain barrier. So all these things make it leaky, and all the inflammatory factors, they come into the brain and they affect the brain functioning. So although the person was already having the stress, but stress is causing the weakening of his or her brain structure functioning. And on the other hand, at the cellular level, what is happening? At all the cells level, which causes, ultimately there is something called as NFKB, nuclear factor kappa B. This is the main thing which has been, this is the one main link which has been provided by all the various mind-body therapies we talk about. Whether it is meditation, whether it is exercise, whether it is anything else, ultimately what they do is, this interleukin TNF alpha and interleukin B, they go to all the trillions of cells of the body and they activate nuclear factor kappa B. And that leads to the production of these reactive oxygen species. In simple terms, they say they destroy all the mitochondria of the body. The mitochondria stops functioning, the reactive oxygen species, they start putting it up. It's just like our cell is on the boiling water. It starts getting boiled, there are pores, there are holes which are created in the cell, and it goes either into the stage of cancer, or it goes down into apoptosis, or we say it as the cell death occurs. So all these cells, and it causes within the cell, if you see, this oxidative stress will lead to the damage of the telomeres. So it leads to, in the brain, it leads to Parkinson's disease. In rest of the body, now this is one thing which I would like to just bring your attention to. So how we can measure, even within a non-invasive way. Again, as a recent paper which was published just 2 weeks back, I tried to take it up from there. They say that telomere length is inversely related to vagal tone and HRV. That means if a person is having high parasympathetic activity, they say at the cellular level in the trillions of cells of our body, we are capable of reducing this boiling. So if the vagal tone is high, the telomere is definitely is good. Shoelace fraying is not occurring in our chromosomes, and we are going on to the better stage. So what is the role of the mind-body medicine and all these things? So this is how the bottom-up mechanisms are. They work in two ways, from up to down or down to up. There are two mechanisms. Bottom-up means suppose a person is going for Tai Chi. See all these things, these are totally unrelated. Yoga or manipulation, that is we are doing the chiropractic. Or another person who is going for Tai Chi. What is common in all these things? Can anybody can tell? What is common amongst all these things? Activation, stimulation, what else? Movement, posture. Very nice. One very common thing is there is a huge connection between the mind and the body. If you are doing a Tai Chi movement, it is not like an aberrant movement. Person is not just running over there. The person is having full mind when the person is moving any swaying movement. These are the activities, if you see in the Oriental medicine, these were created for this thing only, that there will be a more and more of the mind-body connections are being built from the age of 7 years. That was in our Indian culture also. If you go to Chinese or to any Oriental medicine, it was there. Now if you come to osteopathic medicine also, it is one and the same thing. The practitioner is putting in complete attention, as in somehow in unison with the patient. Patient, what is happening to him or her? He is just trying to manipulate those things in a very corrective way. And so the afferents will go from there, from the somatic receptors, that is from here. It comes up from there. All the receptors will go. And then ultimately they have found that the vagal nerve, which is one of the biggest nerves, it carries all the things from our gut area. Anything which is being manipulated, anything, any digestion which is going on, any thought. If somebody asks in the morning, if you don't like it, what is the thing? We feel uncomfortable. But if we try to feel it deep, where do we feel uncomfortable? Somebody feels that I am having uncomfortable in the hand. Very rarely, maybe not. We always feel uncomfortable here only, never outside. This is the visceral structures. So these visceral structures, the vagus viscerosensory nerves, they travel via the parasympathetic. And from the spinal sympathetic, they carry these signals from the periphery, and it goes to the via various stations in the various areas to this executive homeostatic network. And then what happens? It leads to the neuroplastic changes. And in the neuroplastic changes, what happens? This whole area, there is a complete neural representation. In a normal person, when a person is under stress, the left and the right brain, if you see the signals, they will find that they are not coherent. Some activity in the left and in the right is not working. Because of these two things, the person is not capable of performing at their high efficiency level. So the psychophysiological action of yogic practices, it says that the optimal health depends upon the efficient exchange of information between periphery and CNS. But how? Through the efferent vagal tone. Now again, this is again what we can see, that vagus nerve has 80% sensory fibers. But what happens, this all those who are from the medical background, they will be able to relate it, appreciate it. They go back to anatomy classes and try to see to it. We say, no, what is vagus? They say vagus is an efferent nerve. It goes from here, it goes from here, it goes from here. Although it carries 80% sensory fibers. So when it is coming up, earlier we never used to talk about as an anatomist or as a physiologist. We never used to focus on it. Now we know that these are not only talking related to vomiting or to extremes of things, even for the normal gut feeling which we are saying about, the contraction that we are talking about, or we feel good when we are talking about. It is, the recent research clearly says, if your vagal nerve, if the vagal tone is high, if the vagus is working in a nice way, you will find that there will be an action onto the executive homeostatic network, and so there will be a coherent flow from there back down, from the above down to the same autonomic areas, and we find that the parasympathetic activity is high, the inflammation is lesser in the person, there is lesser degradation of telomeres, and the person is healthier and happier. So what the mind body practice is, now this is how actually the yogasanas are different, or for that matter tai chi or anything. Even though there is a very severe activity going on in the right side of the screen or in the left side of the screen, but you can see that the mind and body are not connected. So this is how we have been designing our, even when we come to the modern medicine, if you come to the to the physiotherapy rooms, they don't talk about connect your breath with your movement. They say simply you do the exercises. When you go for any athletic training, they always used to say over there that you have to perform at 40%, 70%, 80%. Now where this comes into, mind body comes into, all the recent peak performance institutes or the labs, they focus on this breath. They always talk about it. They have a separate session, whether you are a shooter, whether you are an athlete, or even though you are only a chess player. Chess player means you just don't need much of your muscular power. But the regime is now built on the mind-body medicine. Mind-body intervention, not the medicine for them. And another thing is that again, these things were not just put up like that. If you see that yogasanas, they are slow, gentle. If you talk about the impact over there, maybe that most of the audience with a little bit of props can do the yoga activities. But if anybody asks us to run for 50 meters, how many will be able to do it? So there is a less chance of harms. There is more result, because that the stretch is maintained. Isometric exercise, it is maintained just for 10 seconds, not more than that, or for practitioners only for this. And this is also see again, whether it is these activities, tai chi, or if you talk about this girl, you can see one pose is followed by a counter pose. So the flexibility, and along with that the activities were designed in a very scientific manner. So when you are doing it, the somatosensory, all of them are stimulated, and they are doing it in a coordinated manner, not in a haphazard manner. So mind is able to reorganize itself. It is capable of having the neural representations, and when these are reorganized over a long period of time, any slow rhythmic movement exercise, whether it is music on all those things, the mind recognizes and then gives them more of the efferent flow. So I can leave it. There is no CVS overloading. All these exercises are like that. So now coming to the top-down mechanism. Now here I can put few of them. For example, it can be a biofeedback. A person is having one particular brainwave pattern. Suppose this is the usual brainwave pattern. The example is, now you just let me pause for 2 seconds and you see, were you all over here? You will find that part of you were connected in many ways to outside, even being over here. That is being reflected in the EEG if we take it right now. When a person has an intention to relax and focuses inside, what happens is, because of this EHN activity, because of what we have just discussed till now, for example, even if we talk about brain tap or this brainwave entrainment, or we talk about simple meditation, or we talk about hypnosis or mental imagery, which is being used by all the prime or the peak for performer athletes or the mental athletes, they are asked to train their mind. What is happening is, with the focused attention and intention to relax, this EHN activity, they are causing the neural representation is changing in the brain. And the reorganization of these neural representations within the CNS, it causes the enhanced bidirectional communication between the regions of the cerebral cortex, and as I've told you, cerebral cortex, then subcortex and the peripheries. So there is increased enhanced flow, and it leads to what all these biofeedback techniques does. It increases this executive homeostatic network. There is more and more of the flow that starts coming from the brain. The organized flow calms the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system reflects itself by having a high level of heart rate variability, high autonomic tone, and it also causes an improvement. It produces this relaxation response. The previous speaker has told. I'll not got into it. It is just the opposite of stress mediated response. So when a person is relaxed, it reflects itself in the cell as what? Few substrates. Number one, it causes an increase in the mitochondrial ATP synthase by the epigenetic mechanism, or at the same level, it causes a decrease in the telomere attrition, or it increases the telomere length. So when these two activities are working, our mind is capable of working more. It has more of the energy. And so this is what it does. It causes calmer mind, healthy aging, stable telomere, decrease in this all the inflammatory parameters, and all our things are working in a nice way. This is, if I put up what I have told you, this sums up my whole presentation. That all these activities will cause a higher parasympathetic tone, higher heart rate variability, decrease of the inflammation, increase of the anti-inflammatory, ultimately causing a stable telomere and a higher level of mitochondrial activity. So all these things, factors I'll just come into one example. We know that meditation is something which we know. Now, when we are talking about, for example, if any auditory stimulus is given or from light stimulus is there, we know that this stimulus is given something from outside. When you are meditating, you are just relaxing and you are sitting inside. Do you really do something? Then how it is capable of helping us out? So Deepak Chopra, we all know that many of you would have heard of him. Dr. Deepak has he passed his internal medicine from AIIMS, and then he left for abroad and he has been practicing there. He is a very known figure. So he talks about one thing, that nobody knows how many thoughts we think in a day, but at an average we think about 50 to 60,000 thoughts per day. But because amazingly we are in a habit of habits, 95% of the thoughts what we thought today was there yesterday also. The pattern remains same. The same person comes, the same reaction occurs. The different person comes, different reaction occurs. We never have a time to think over anything. We never try to go deep. Another very important fact is 90% of the thoughts that we think are of negative connotations. That is one of the main reasons that we are aging. Because all the times, every day, that 90% negative thoughts is making us like concrete jungles. We are not able to change around. Our thinking patterns are not changing. Meditation just tries to bring the flexibility what any sort of yogasanas or any sort of physical activity will do for our body. So what did they try to do? This study was done in Harvard by one scientist. He said that, okay, let me have two groups, one on the left, one on the right side. They said that, okay, let me see how much the mind can change with the intensity to relax. What he did was, he says that, okay, one group will practice piano with one hand for 5 days. Monday to Friday, in the medical school, 2 hours class. They were given pianos and they did it. To the other group, they say, okay, you sit in front of piano, but you will not touch the keys. You will just put up, you will just do the rehearsing of those keys, but without touching the piano. So does it change the mind? That means there is no stimulus. If at all the person has to do it, the mind, the music has to come from inside. Sa, re, ga, ma. If it is as simple as that, the person has to think about it, sa, re, ga, ma, every time. So what was the impact of it? They found out that this was the result. Above was by the physical practice and lower one was the mental involvement of it. We can clearly see that nearly 80 to 90% of what the physical practice was there could be seen even in the mental practice. So this much capacity or the capability we are having if we start only thinking about from inside only. And lots and lots of studies have come up. And the basic is, physiological basis is simple. The mind, when you are using any mental imagery or any hypnosis or biofeedback or meditation technique, mind is unable to differentiate between the imagination and the reality. If you just tell to the mind that I am playing this music, it is as good as mind is actually the mind believes that yes, I am putting it up. The only problem that comes is that when we start saying no, I am doing it, but I am not doing it. So that is why we are in this sort of thing. So we are actually a huge power source. We all have it. And all these things, the substrates are also, now this all know, neuroscience of emotions. If you say, then I'll continue, otherwise I'll just so so neurosciences of emotions, what they did is, this experiment was done by Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama, he was invited to US, and they try to see how the activity of the brain works. And not to this level, but to a smaller level, we have tried to do the experiment with us also last year. So what he did is, he took the 8 monks who have been practicing 10,000 hours, means nearly whole of their life. They have lived in our what is it, that Dharmshala, and from Dharmshala they were just sent over there, and they took it, and they said, let me just see how their minds are when they are not meditating. They don't have anything, they don't have money, they don't have any other as resources. Even though they are in this country, they don't belong to this country. So that means they don't even have the country. There is nothing that they have, and they don't know for how much time Dalai Lama will also be there. So what I'm trying to say is, if the perception of the stress is to that level, even if we are put in that situation, perhaps we may not be able to relate to it. So and there is nothing for them to gain also in this world, if nothing to lose. That itself is not a good thing for mind. Mind needs some stimulation always. It needs some reward, dopamine stimulation at every moment of the life. So 8 monks with these experiment, they took it, and they said to them, just simply sit with the eyes closed, and they usually have a prayer session where they say that, everything is happening good for everyone. Compassion, that's all. So when they sat, they did not go for any meditation. They found that the greater activation of the gamma waves. Now gamma waves is when the mind is very active. When they are relaxing, they are very active. See the paradox of life. We want to be active, but we are not able to do it. Mind is not at rest at all. So they found that not only this, and they especially found it in the left, this dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is the area when we are happy. In the depression, what happens is, this area actually shrivels. That is why they are always thinking in the negative connotation only. They are always in the negative side only. So they found out that the images of the brain, they showed it that even in the resting state, their mind was having higher metabolic activity. The brain flow was more. Again, that means what? There is a higher level of the mitochondrial synthase which is there. They have higher reserves which they are capable of utilizing, and because of the flexibility, they are capable of changing it from one to the other area of the brain. So left prefrontal cortex is, then the scientists, they told Davidson, they concluded that he is the happiest of the persons I have seen in my life. He is one of the happiest persons I have seen in my life, if my image is true. That means he was unable to believe that image can be so true. This is what an internal stimulus from within can happen. He had been practicing over there for more than 30 years or so. He might have encountered thousands of people, maybe very affluent, maybe something who have achieved a lot in their life. But happiness is not at all related with the material thing. Again, something which has been going on in our things. And now these are other things. I'll just skip through them. Global modification of histones means, again, the epigenetic mechanism. They found out all the intensive practice of mindfulness meditation, they found that it reduces the pro-inflammatory. What is the pathway? Same one. From higher executive homeostatic network, improved autonomic areas, decrease in the inflammation, leading to all these things, and there is epigenetic stimulation. So same way, so thinking in a certain way can change the structure and functional organization of the brain. And this is what is being used by all the people, by various practice. Every mental practice, every thought leads its stamp remark on the structure of the brain. So I'll just go through all these things. There are lots and lots of studies which they say that, the mind. So this is what ultimately, if it comes to that, the EHN, it causes, that is from the higher brain, there are multiple levels. And it is ultimately the vagal output which is responsible for improvement of the autonomic activities. So it leads to increase in the parasympathetic activity. There is a suppression of our adrenaline system. There is decreased anxiety and perceived stress and inflammation that makes a person physical, mental and spiritually healthy. I'll just come in very brief to 2 studies which are going on. This is going on in JIPMER. One of them, two of them are the students. So one of them is present over here only. Assessment of EEG spectrum, autonomic functions and markers of subclinical inflammation and amongst regular heartfulness meditators. We just try to take that, if the person is meditating, what are the changes that happens in the person. So we hooked up the person, all the EEGs we had hooked up, and we tried to see the same link. When a person is actually meditating, what actually happens? Is the person is capable of changing it? We have tried to take the axis completely from the brain till the down. That means from EEG, from the inflammatory parameters, heart rate variability, the blood pressure variability, and all those things we are trying to take up. So this is another thing which is going on with the brain tap only, in which the person is trying to talk about the immediate effect of auditory brainwave entrainment on the EEG, heart rate variability, and cognitive functions. So what we did over there was that same person will be given 3 sessions. First he will be exposed to delta or to theta or to the alpha, and then we try to see whether it is capable of reducing the stress in the person, whether it is capable of improving it. So this was the study procedure, which is a very exhaustive one. It usually lasts for nearly 90 minutes, 1.5 hours or so. So after rest we will do, then we will give a cognitive task, then we will give music for nearly 20 minutes or so, and then again EEG will be taken, and the results have been very exciting. For that I will just ask Dr. Saundar to come up over here in very brief to just tell out how the things are.
Thank you. I'm a student of Dr. Vivek sir. We have been doing this research for the past 8 months here, and once the subject is arrived to our lab, we will be taking EEG throughout the full session of 90 minutes. The first thing what we are looking for is, we are having a baseline EEG along with EKG, that's the ECG we will be taking there, and we will be analyzing HRV through that. The study procedure goes like, lead to ECG we will be taking it. We are using brain tap, and especially now we are focusing on auditory stimulation, not the photo stimulation, only on auditory stimulation. In between, before the subject will be doing 5 different cognitive tasks. As sir was mentioning, it is going to test all our executive functions like inhibition, decision making, visuospatial. Each and every cognitive task is based on one parameter. Like that, we'll be doing 5 different tasks followed by a 20 minutes of intervention. This intervention is going to be like different type of entrainments. If you remember, Patrick sir was morning telling about different interventions. These entrainments can be delta entrainment, theta entrainment, beta entrainment, whatever it is. So we are comparing these different interventions and also entrainments. These are some of the tests: Berg's chord sorting test, Corsi block tapping test, time wall, oddball, arithmetics and all. And the results, we are using quantitative EEG analysis. We are looking for the coherence, cross-mutual information, phase locking values and all. And what we got here is, say for example, here we have given theta entrainment, and we are looking for power spectral density, what happened to delta power in each of this. We are using 19 channel EEG there. As you can see there, the blue one gives a delta power during pre-baseline, what happens during the intervention time, that music 20 minutes, and what happened post baseline. These are all immediate effects. You can see that clearly in the post baseline there is an increase in theta power, and then what is happening to alpha power. Then we are not considered here about the gamma, and in this especially you can see that during music how the beta power has consistently increased in all our central, temporal and parietal areas. This gives us a clear clue that everything depends upon individuals. All these data are like the same individuals are coming in different sessions after washout period, which means that I'm not going to compare age related, like say for example a 50-year-old with a 50-year-old. I'm comparing the same person again and again with different sessions, so that pre and post values, the difference we are put up here. And this is about alpha entrainment, the delta power. You can see that the baseline has decreased, and then here also this is one more interesting thing. In alpha entrainment, what happens to the alpha power? You can clearly see that from the pre-baseline During music, it has come down in all the areas, almost the posterior and the occipital areas. And the last. Yes, the same changes here. And what happens in delta entrainment to the delta power? You can see the green ones there. It's getting up everywhere, almost in all the regions. And delta entrainment, theta power. And many interesting things what I'm learning today by attending this session is each and every individual is different. And that is where I was stuck up when doing this analysis. Why each and every person in different session is having different things. Say for example, one person is stressed up. On that particular day, if I take a pre and post, he's having a different change. I cannot have a normative data on that, but still working on it. Hope it will take some months. Hope I'll come back with full data there. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Dr. Saundar. So I'll just try to sum up with what I'm trying to say is that it is not only important to talk about mind-body medicine, because whatever we do, ultimately, it has to be put up across the scientific world. Scientific world has to accept it, then only this will come into the mainstream and it can be given its appropriate place. So this mind body therapist, one of the student is working on this component, the other one is working on how the meditation is capable of changing this psychoneuroimmuno this axis, how it is working. So he's working on these two things. And we have tried to base our all the things what I have discussed with you, that is on the top down at the bottom up mechanism. Ultimately, one of the parameters is that autonomic tone. It is one of the impressions which can be taken even without taking even the blood sample of the person or doing it out. So if we are finding that the heart rate variability is increasing of a person, and we do some sessions, or if we find that the brain power is one thing which has not come up because the laptop shift has occurred is he also tried to look at the coherence, which I told you over there. It is not only important how your left or the right brain are working, it is important how much they are working in unison with each other. So he was able to clearly see, if I will just try to put it up tomorrow or so, there was clearly the areas, even we were also astonished that how it is happening, that when this brain and train, this music was given alpha or beta or delta, when we are giving it, we are able to find out that there was lighting of, say, for example, 4 areas at the pre-level. That means when a person is silent, relaxed, and he comes to the lab and we ask them simply lie down. After that, few minutes or so, we find out that it has lit nearly 6 areas. It even goes to 18 areas, even when the person is not working. So that means our brain is trainable. And those things can also, the impressions, the coherence increases, the neurophysiological signals improve. Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention.